Well, welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast. Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. It's a rainy day outside where I am, and weather's been a little off for a few days, so I've been kind of hanging out in the outpost with music playing, and it's been a good couple of days. And music and adventure, that's kind of the theme I'm going with today for the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories, brought to you by our good friends at Star Bank. And my partner in crime, my guest for the day, is a gentleman by the name of Ben Weaver. And Ben makes his living by creating music, and he creates some pretty magical stuff. And it's the whole process for Ben and how it ties into the outdoors, which is why I wanted you along today. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. With all this COVID stuff going on, the music industry, you guys have been frozen a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say things have changed, but I kind of stopped participating in like normalized music business or the mainstream quite a while ago. But I still was largely impacted because so much of what I do involves bringing people together, which obviously hasn't really been happening. So yeah, it's been a big change.
You are the focus of this week's Minnesota Bound television episode. We came out and documented your story because the way you work is different from 99.9978643.1% of people creating music. You sing about the world around us, the natural world around us, but it's how you do your work that's so intriguing to me. Talk about your bike and what you do.
Well, yeah, I guess I always have to kind of place some context, which was I'm 41 this year, and pretty much from the time I dropped out of college after my first year, I've been, trying to play music in some format or another, but for a long time was steeped pretty heavily in like the being on the road and the sort of like Townes Van Zandt, folk, country, blues, songwriter, troubadour tradition, I guess you could say, and was blessed pretty early on with being well received overseas, mostly in Europe. So I spent a lot of time touring and playing music over there, and then built sort of a following over here. But somewhere in like the early 2000s, I became like really just tired and worn down and unhappy with the way that I was doing things, and kind of recognizing that I was living, I don't know, I was living trying to achieve accomplishments to a set of standards that weren't actually really my own. And when I started dismantling that, I sort of did so by, I spent time cooking in a kitchen, was sort of like at the beginning of the farm to table movement when that really was just barely a thing. And I think it was actually that process that was one of the huge, I don't know, it ignited a bunch of stuff for me, because I was working so close to this food that was coming close to the land into my hands, and I was learning how to like put fat and fire and like creative spirit together to make something to nourish people, which is basically was what I had always done in art, but this was just to take a different form, so I could see things differently. And at that time I had really started riding my bicycle a lot more than I had for a long time, and throughout that time of transformation, I just started getting curious, like what if I tried to ride my bike to my gigs instead of driving? And in the city, I always hated driving to gigs, because then you had to like load in and then go park your car and come back, and I could just ride I remember I think actually the first gig I ever rode to was something at the 7th Street entry, and it was just like the best. I just rode my bike right up to the stage door and took it downstairs into the green room and played my show and then rode home. And that was before I just had my banjo strapped on my back like a backpack. And then I just figured out, like, there have been some other people who've been experimenting with this, like, throughout the time that I was learning how to do it. So, like, I had some ideas of how to carry my instruments on the bike, which I started figuring out how to do. And, that particular show that you all came to was kind of significant because the very first place that I rode to of any substantial distance to play a show was I rode to Winona and then on to Viroqua and then home. So so I just started doing that. I decided, like, can I see if I can ride 100 miles in a day and play a show? And that was kind of an arbitrary number, but it was based on, like, spacing things out enough so that I could actually cover some distance. So it worked, and it was unbelievably satisfying. And so I just kept building from there.
And then 100 miles turned into 3,000 and became a film, Music for Free. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. Like, you are working and playing with this amount of freedom that most people just don't have. Talk about the trip. Talk about the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess in the moment I'm going to end up responding to what you just said about freedom, which I feel like is a huge part of what the work was for me. And earlier on, when I was describing this state of being kind of like not really happy or fulfilled with the way I was doing the work that I felt called to do, and recognizing, like, that the music business, as I had come to understand it growing up pursuing it in the way that I did, was that, like, it was really about being the exception to the rule, and the rule being that, like, you can have all the talent in the world, you can do all the right things, and still, like, not be able to feed your family or pay your bills or be recognized by enough people so that you can live. And for me, that was what I was trying to do. Was I had this calling of making music and writing songs and telling stories, and that was felt like my responsibility. But it seemed like no matter what I did, it just wasn't like I couldn't get in front of enough people to make ends really meet. And then I decided, wow, I mean, if it's about being the exception to the rule, then I'm just going to change the rules and make them up my own. Make them accommodate what it is that I really want, which is to be outside all the time and be free, like you just said. And it was when I made that leap that things started coming together. And that, as cliche as I think that it might sound, I do believe with every drop of blood in my body that we are here for a reason, and until we align with that reason, we're kind of we end up fighting ourselves, and we end up fighting a lot of stuff around us. And when we have the courage to align with that purpose, which I think daily we are all given, like, little inklings and signs of that. It's just that normative culture teaches us to ignore that, or we tell ourselves we're crazy, or whatever story we have. But until we can, like, actually stand and face that truth, then I think things really change. And that's what I experienced. So, I did all these, I kept evolving my trips, and I focused them largely around water, bodies of water. And so then, like, 4 years went by, and I was crossing the UP on a super remote route that I had made, going along the bottom of Lake Superior, and was on this snowmobile bridge on an old, like, logging camp road, covered in mud, having a snack. And I just realized, like, wow, I've really kind of done something here. I'm riding like 120 miles today, and I'm playing a show, and, like, nobody has any idea where I am. Like,
yeah.
And they don't really understand what it is I'm doing, which is fine. But when I get to, like, that day I was going to Houghton, and when I get to Houghton and people there see me show up, in that case, like, covered in mud and with my bike and everything, then they, like, they have some sense, at least, of, like, wow, You didn't just show up in a van. And what is that all about? So then I get the chance to talk to those people, and then the story starts to emerge, and then it starts to impact people. So it was that day that I thought, I think I need to do what I'm doing on a route or in a context that people can really understand the capacity of. Because when I'm out there making my own routes, just, drawing weird jagged lines between small communities, it's only the people in those communities that really understand or have a sense of what I'm doing. And then the story is able to impact them. So that was when I decided to do the Tour Divide, or the Great Divide mountain bike route, because the route is so well known within the off-road cycling community, and within the community of sponsors that I've been working with, that it seemed like that would be just a really great platform to do what I was doing, to give back to the communities, which has also been a big part of what I'm doing, and to be able to have the story get some wings under it so that it could reach some people. So that was how I decided to ride the Great Divide mountain bike route, which is the longest mapped mountain bike route in the world at this point.
From BC all the way to Mexico.
Yeah, to the U.S. Mexico border. So yeah, we rode right around 3,000 miles, because there's a new spur that goes into Missoula, Montana, and actually the Great Divide mountain bike route's been extended up into Jasper, so it's even longer. But we started in Banff with the Tour Divide mountain bike race, but with the start of that, to sort of just really encapsulate like as much of the community of people who you encounter along the way of that route as possible.
And you had a filmmaker in
Yeah,
tow.
yeah, my friend Keenan DePlank, who was 21 at the time, and had never ridden more than 100 miles in a day, came along to be the self-supported filmmaker, which was an incredible experience.
So so how do you pull off a trip like this? I mean, what's the day-to-day like? Do you have whatever it is, a month worth of places to stay booked? Or you just kind of riding and then playing, and at the end of the day you figure out where to throw a sleeping bag? I mean, how did that all work?
Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. I mean, a lot of it was made possible by all the work I had done previously in terms of like coordinating and managing all the other little tours that I had done. But I had everything mapped out ahead of time. So we had 15, I think it was 15 shows booked in advance, and we had planned to do the route in 31 days. Um, and that was largely based on my previous riding of like trying to do 100 or plus miles a day. But we think we had to take 8 days off because of like just logistics of what time some of the shows were, because some of them were earlier in the afternoon and we needed to get there the night before. So this time we ended up riding like an average of 150 miles a day, because of the eight days that we had to take off from riding.
Wow.
But yeah, everything was booked in advance. There were a couple of like very sweet shows that we came across this family. This is in the film. We came across this family that was stuck in snow trying to go over a pass out of Whitefish, Montana, and we couldn't help tow them out. So I offered to sing them a song, and they all got out on the back of their pickup truck and sat on the tailgate, and I sang them a song, which was pretty awesome. So we had a few like impromptu things like that, but largely everything was planned out. And to this day, I mean, I've probably got like 20,000 some miles of musical bike touring logged, and I've never missed or been late for a show. So I was able to keep that record going throughout this trip. And then whenever we were doing a show, we were usually in either at somebody's house along the route who was somehow involved in supporting the riders, or we were in a town. So we would stay, we would always end up staying with someone. And then the rest of the time we were just treating it like we would any other bike packing trip, where we just would, we were either on BLM land or at a Forest Service campground or somewhere that, was safe to sleep for the night.
So you ride south from Banff, play Fernie, Polaris, Montana. What is it? Pass City, Wyoming. Is that right? Silverthorne, Colorado. Is it Platoro? Did I say that right?
Littoral. Yeah, you go through
Littoral,
that. Yeah,
Colorado, and then Pie Town, New Mexico, which
yeah,
I've never heard of.
that's an amazing place.
And I, leading question, I mean, what do you see on a trip like that?
Well, you see, like, you see an incredibly diverse landscape. You know, like that year there had been record snowfall in the north and drought in the south, which
Hmm.
was really incredible. You know, to see that north to south transformation of you know, vegetation and desert, and the different ways that water moves through a space, and um, the different ecologies, and then you see all of these people. You know, you see all these people for real. And you know, I mean, I can share this story that, like, the very before I did this trip, I went out with my friend Jay Peterberry, who, you know, I think is arguably like one of the most knowledgeable people alive about endurance cycling, about this race, has done an enormous amount of work for evolving bike packing, and long distance racing. And we just did a little like scouting route for me to get a sense of the communities and what the route was like. And we rode from Pinedale, Wyoming to Atlantic City, which is Atlantic City is a tiny little mining town that sits down in this little, like, sort of sleeve, like, wrinkle of on your sleeve of the land, and you can't even really see it until you're basically on top of it. And as we were descending into the town, I noticed this sign, but I didn't really see what it said. And so when we were riding out of town, I stopped and looked at it, and there was this pickup truck. And in the back of the pickup truck, there was a whole bunch of like 8x10 photos of like every Democratic or liberal candidate since Lord knows when. And it said pickup truck for sale, $1,500, asses for free.
Wow.
And and I just remember reading that and going like, wow. And you know, I've been doing tons of riding in northern, you know, where I live in northern Minnesota, especially in the Arrowhead region. Um, and you know, people would always ask me like, aren't you afraid of like running into some like scary people on four-wheelers or side by sides or something, or you know. And in all my miles, I mean, I've had like head-on run-ins with logging trucks on roads where they're literally the only place I have to go is like up into the trees.
Mm.
And those guys still have, you know, we still exchange like a wave. And I've really learned that the people that are out in the woods are out there for the same reason that I am, which is to connect with something different. We just all have really different ways of doing it. And not that there aren't like, there is evil in the world. That's there's no question about that. But in general, like, that was an overwhelming feeling that I had from this trip down the Great Divide, is that in general, like, people's default is to help each other. And there are all these narratives going around, you know, in non-human formats, mostly like the internet and movies and television, that we are a different way. But when you bring people together, the the predominant narrative is to ask, like, what do you need? How are you doing? Where are you going? What have you seen? And when people connect in that regard, you know, then you get straight through the bullshit real quick, and you start to see the humanity in each other. So I experienced a lot of that, and I feel like it was a metaphor going down the Great Divide, you know, which follows the Continental Divide, and this thinking daily about how these sort of like lines that we draw on the map are really pretty arbitrary in terms of state lines, or things like that. And a continental divide, or like a hydrological divide like that, it's not really arbitrary because the water's drawing the line, but really, like, that line is always shifting to some extent because the water's shifting the land, and
Yep.
all the plants underneath the land are connected through their root systems and through mycelium and all these other, you know, networks that we know about. And so really, like, what is a divide? And those ecosystems, being as diverse as they are it's like one of the clearest metaphors for the more diverse a system is, the stronger that it is. And that's the sort of story that I'm interested in right now, is like, how do we look at these like ways that the land is inherently, anti-material. It's inherently anti-capitalist. It's inherently anti-consumptive. There's no waste in ecosystems if you look at how they behave. And so to look at that stuff and apply it to, what can humans learn to elevate themselves and live in more reciprocity? Well, it surrounds you in those types of spaces. And I saw that in, little ways within those communities that I think we could grow a lot from. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not.
For sure. You are listening to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Thanks to Star Bank for making each week happen here online.
Hi there, Ron Shera here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? It's time to make the switch. Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Let me give you some advice from personal experience. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Star Bank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Star Bank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. From Maple Lake to Elbow Lake, Eagle Bend to Eden Prairie. Check out all that Star Bank has to offer at starbank.net.
My guest today, Ben Weaver, great musician, great music, great way of living. Rides his bike to all his events, goes from gig to gig, and you stay off the main roads. You like to ride back roads, sort of the gravel, get off the asphalt. For people who want to see the film that was created on your ride down the Great Divide, what's the best way to make that happen?
Yeah, I think, well, the best is to just Google it, because it'll come up if you just Google Music for Free. It's being hosted by Outside Magazine. You can also access it through my website, which is benweaver.net. I believe that you can also find it through Salsa Cycles, which is my bicycle sponsor. But yeah, if you just Google Music for Free, then you can watch it you can figure out which format works best for you.
Kind of a silly question. You don't have an instrument laying nearby, do you?
I don't actually.
I knew that was going to happen. Your music, what's your message? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to make people think?
Well, no, I mean, I think that the way that we think about changing the world, I think we're wrong. I think that we feel like we need to constantly act and we need to constantly go do things. And I think what we end up doing is repeating the very same patterns that cause the problems that we're in. And so I feel like until we actually decide to walk down a different road, and by we I mean I mean that I think I mean that in a lot of ways, but initially I mean like just individually. And I don't think we can figure out where the stream branches off, or or like notice the two tracks separating from the main gravel road until we A, slow down, and B, start to use our imaginations and get curious about, like, where does that stream go, or where does that road go, or where does that deer trail go, unless our imagination is activated. And I think it's our imagination that is going to lead us into a truly new or different space. So I think that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to lead my life with my imagination and use my imagination as much as possible. Because I believe that is where the that's where the earth speaks through us. That's where we're in most alignment with our initial purpose. Like however we believe that we need to align with that. So I don't. I feel really strongly that I don't think we should be preaching to each other. I don't think that. I think, like I said earlier, we need diversity of all kinds, and we need to open to that as much as possible. I can. A couple of weeks ago, it was more than a couple of weeks ago. It was like the very beginning of COVID. I was out for a 100 or so mile ride with my oldest son, who was just turned 18 and graduating from high school, and we were coming back through this kind of like little ragged landscape in the Twin Cities, not far from Coldwater Spring, in what's now called Minnehaha Falls Dog Park, and we we came across a coyote and a black lab that were fighting,
Wow.
and it was pretty incredible. And we witnessed their standoff, and then we witnessed them like join in together. And they were in on the edge of this pond, and they fell into the pond, and they were twisting and turning around on top of each other. And there was this moment where you couldn't tell which was the coyote and which was the lab. And I think, to me, that's the moment that I'm interested in our life. It's like, where is that time where we have an interaction with another person that we have othered, or that we don't think is the same as us, but then suddenly we see ourselves in them. Or where is the point where we're, on a body of water, or in a place in the woods, and we're no longer consuming it for the experience, but it's actually like it's bitten us, and it's kind of cast a spell into our souls, and is doing work on us. That's the moment that I think that things start to change. And I'm very curious, like, how we could redefine our relationships, or even remember our relationships with each other and with the land, from that type of place. So I feel like I'm just trying to create that experience for people in my words and in my music and in the space that I try to hold open, as an invitation to say, like, go from here now, and do what does this inspiration, or what is whatever you took from our time together, where could that lead your experiences from here?
Well, you're how many albums do you have out? I mean, it's a lot. It's like 15, right?
No, I think I'm terrible at keeping track, but I think it's like not. I think it's nine, and I just recorded a new record that I'm just sort of like gently holding on to until it feels like the right time to release. That was a collaboration with my friend Strong Buffalo, who's a Dakota poet and elder, and that's a little bit of a new exploration. So I guess that would be 10. So yeah,
So
it's
is that
getting
where the
it's getting
name,
up there.
one of your albums is I Would Rather Be a Buffalo?
Hmm.
Any correlation to the name there?
No, other than just like, I think the universe just keeps handing you things you're meant to be handed. No, that record was written quite a while ago, but that title came from this time where I was working with a friend of mine, who was starting a charcuterie business, and we were using this old like windowless kitchen in downtown Minneapolis. And like, while I loved the work, like learning to dismantle these really incredible hogs, and make salami and things out of them, we just were inside all day long, and I couldn't see outside. And I was doing dishes one day, and a friend of mine called and just said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'd rather be a buffalo," because I just wanted to be, I wanted to be standing in the sun, or having the rain on my back in a prairie somewhere, and not inside under fluorescent lights.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I just always hung on to that line, so I titled the record.
Well, you can check out Ben's music um, really anywhere you find music online. I happen to use Spotify to get to all your stuff. Um, and have been lucky enough to see the film on the bike trip. Just an unbelievable experience. And I'm guessing with COVID, like you said, things are kind of on hold right now. But once things loosen up, where should people find your upcoming tour schedule?
Yeah, the best thing to do is just like go to my website, which is like I said before, benweaver.net, and I will list shows up there, but um, I'm working to actively mostly communicate through my email list, which I try to send out like once a month, and I don't know, I try to make that special because it's a format that feels more honest to me than social media.
Mm,
And more, I guess, a little bit more, has more integrity. So if you go to my website, one of those annoying boxes will pop up that'll ask you to sign up for my mailing list. And if you want to know what I'm up to, that would be the best thing to do, would be to sign up for that. Or people can, I do, I'd use Facebook and Instagram just to simply promote things at this point. And Ben Weaver Music is my handle on those, so you can follow me there as well.
well, keep making music. We love you. And your story is one for television for sure. So
Thanks for talking, and yeah.
It's great to catch up, and we'll see you on the road soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, you've been listening to the Minnesota Bound podcast. Thanks again to Ben Weaver for taking some time to hang out today. These are the stories behind the stories. And until next week, you know what we always say: introduce a kid to the great outdoors.